Bryan. As a young boy, I met him when he was 11 or 12 years old. I was friends with his dad, Joe. We were former adversaries. Joe played for the 76ers, but he was a good friend and someone that I shared a friendship. And it's hard for me to understand now how this is affecting Joe and his wife. So to Kobe's family, I want to send my most sincere and heartfelt regrets and prayers, and my thoughts are with you guys. Kobe was an incredible family man. He loved his wife and daughters. He was an incredible athlete and a leader in a lot of ways. He inspired a whole generation of young athletes. He was one of the first ones to leave high school and come into the NBA and do so well, dominating the game and becoming one of the best scorers that the Los Angeles Lakers has ever seen. I had the privilege of being there when he scored his 81-point game, and it was something that I will always remember as one of the highlights of the things that I have learned and observed in sports. Kobe, my thoughts are with you. Absolutely. Rest in peace, young man. This loss it's just hard to comprehend.
Ironically, I was in the air when news of Kobe's passing in the helicopter broke. Almost cried. Man, I think Kobe and I had some great relationship, but I had the utmost respect for him as a player and a person, and I know he was going to do great things with his life after basketball, just as he did on the court. I just want to send prayers out to his family, his lovely family, and the entire basketball world, because I know I wasn't the only one that almost cried, and I'm sure many people were crying. He was a great one. Not to belittle any of the other tragedies that have happened during my lifetime in sports, with Roberto Clemente's death and Thurman Munson dying in a plane crash, Magic Johnson getting HIV. But this is the worst news I've ever experienced in my life surrounding the world of sports, and I'm truly heartbroken for Kobe, all his fans, the Laker family, the NBA family. It's just the worst. It's just a terrible news. All right, I'm encouraging you to keep Kobe Bryant's family.
One of the things I'm thinking about right now, Michael, is that mainland China is waking up on Monday morning, and he has millions upon millions of fans in China, and they're waking up to this news. And we know what it means to the NBA community and to the American sports fans. Having been in China and seen I was just there for the World Cup over last summer. Kobe was there, and the respect and the adulation that they have for him. I'm just thinking about what we're going to see in this next 24 to 48 hours, where we see the whole world react, and we see just what his star, how far it went. This is one of the most unique situations we've ever seen as far as loss in American pro sports. The active players that are playing today, they all grew up on Kobe. When you talk to players today, they adore him. I will never forget, in the wake of the Cleveland Cavaliers winning the championship in 2016, Kyrie Irving wanted to celebrate that with his hero, who was Kobe. And he went into the locker room after the game, and he FaceTimed with Kobe with the champagne in the locker room. And, of course, Kyrie, when he learned of the news today, couldn't play and went home from the game at Madison Square Garden. The effect on the worldwide basketball community and the effect on the active players who care for him so much, these next 3 to 5 days, we're going to see a period of mourning like we haven't seen in modern sports in our lifetimes.
Brian, that's a good point. I've been trying to put this into a greater context here and think of another example of an athlete passing away so suddenly, but also at the level of popularity and praise and respect that Kobe had amongst his peers and even some of those who didn't necessarily like him when they played against him in the NBA. And I'm having a hard time coming up with it, whether it's in basketball or any other sport. Maybe Roberto Clemente, but he was so well respected, and that was, while he was still playing. But this feels different in the immediacy, Brian, and I'm having a hard time putting it into perspective of just how big a deal this is. And you mentioned how this morning is going to affect the NBA. There are games scheduled right now that are going on. You clearly see players have a difficult time competing in those moments. I'm not sure how that's going to change over the next couple of days.
Well, the only thing I could compare it to in my lifetime, Michael, is Dale Earnhardt. And I'm not a NASCAR fan, but I certainly knew them, and I saw how that affected that community. But the scope of the NBA and the scope of basketball is so exponentially bigger across the world. One of the things that blew me away was when Kobe announced his retirement. Now, he didn't plan on announcing it when he did, but he had such a rough start to that last season in 2015-16 that he announced his retirement. I want to say it was November or early December. And what ended up happening was an incredible outpouring. Every single place he went, the fans craned to get him like a conquering hero. The players from every team came to greet him and talk to him after the games, even the players who didn't know him very well. I remember attending a game in Washington, Kobe's last game in Washington, and the fans were treating him as if he was one of the greatest players in Wizards history. He didn't have any history with the Wizards fan base. He didn't have any history with the New Orleans fan base other than playing there once a year, twice a year. And when I saw that outpouring for his retirement as what turned into a 4-month coronation, my eyes were opened as to just how popular Kobe was. Michael, it's still hard to talk about him in past tense, to be honest with you. But I think even the reaction that we're seeing today in these last few hours, I think it's going to pale in comparison to when we see this.
Lakers will be inside the Staples Center to take on the Los Angeles Clippers, and you can only imagine the amount of emotion that's going to be coursing through that building. And maybe about 48 hours from now, Michael Wilbon joins us for a little bit of perspective. I know, Michael, you joined us a little bit earlier in our coverage, but since then, I know you talked to a lot of people around the league, and you just had an opportunity to let this marinate and digest. What are your thoughts right now?
Well, they're not much different than they were a couple of hours earlier, to tell you the truth. And Austin Rivers very eloquently expressed thoughts that a lot of us are feeling. I don't know that the thoughts are going to have that much in the way of range to them. It's something that we're not going to get over anytime soon. Austin said you don't have to be a basketball fan. You don't have to have been around the industry for years like some of us, like I have, to feel the hurt. I mean, maybe people who have certainly gotten to know him and been around him, and I was for half his life. It's hard to imagine, but remember, he was an 18-year-old in the NBA, and so that's 23 years as a grown man. And my thoughts initially aren't of basketball; they are certainly of his family and his wife and daughters, with losing a daughter as a parent. That's just so difficult to even wrap your head around. And so there's that. There are other moments and other things that come to me much more quickly. Some of them are very personal because I have been covering the league for so long, all of Kobe Bryant's career, all of it. And one of them has to do with my own life. 12 years ago, I had an event, as they say, medically, a heart attack, and I get home from the hospital without having talked to really anybody, and there's an enormous vase of flowers at the front desk. At the front desk at my home, at the front door, and they said, the note said, from Kobe Bryant. And I called the Lakers and I said, this is a joke, right? This is not from, this is somebody else. This is not from Kobe. And John Black, for so long, the director of communications with the Lakers, said, oh no, he called me to get your address, so I know it's not a joke. And at the time, Kobe's daughter was 2 years old. My son was yet to be born, and I got a lecture, a stern one, with certain words in it from Kobe about the things I better do to start taking care of my health. And we talked about children and families. And a good amount of the time that I covered the NBA and would interact with Kobe Bryant, the conversation was not necessarily about basketball. It was very early on. He knew that I had covered Michael Jordan's career a lot, most of it. And we would talk about that because that was always just sort of pushed in front of him. And Kobe was so curious about that. But as he got older, he expressed curiosity in so many other ways. I mentioned earlier how it was just his intellect. I don't want people to overlook. Yeah, you can talk about 81 points. You can talk about 5 championships. You can talk about MVPs. You can talk about all of that stuff, and it's all pertinent to some degree, but not as much as sort of the person. There was a time, I guess, late, maybe the last week of his career, and the Lakers were not going to go to the postseason. The team was falling on hard basketball times.